The first cases were reported in southern China just a few weeks ago. Since then, the coronavirus, now officially a pandemic, has more than 100 countries around the world in its grip. Well, thousands of lives have already been lost as it continues to spread at a rapid rate. As they scrabble to respond, governments have adopted increasingly drastic measures to prevent further contagion. Quarantine orders have been imposed, borders in many places closed, and large-scale events such as football matches cancelled. Amid all the uncertainty, those who can are staying at home, leaving streets eerily deserted. Others, despite warnings, are stockpiling. So on To The Point, we ask, coronavirus, is it out of control? Well, welcome in worrying times to The Point here at DW. And with me in the studio to discuss a global crisis is Wiebke Hollersen, who's written extensively on the coronavirus for the Berlin-based daily Die Welt. She says we don't have to worry about controlling our fear right now. We have to worry about controlling the spread of this virus. Also with us is Ariane Reimers, a correspondent for Germany's ARD network, where she's a specialist on German domestic politics and China, a country she knows very well. And Ariane believes that first China needed help, now China is helping others. And a very warm welcome to Malte, Lehming, author and senior editor at another leading Berlin paper, Der Tagesspiegel, who says, after the 9/11 terror attacks and the 2008 financial crisis, this is the third major upheaval of this century. Thank you all for being here. Wiebke, I'd like to begin with you. And the virus continues to spread here in Germany. So I'd like to ask you about one of those quintessentially German words, angst. How much of it is there here in Germany?
I think people are not panicking yet. And there's no reason to do this at this point. But we should all be really prepared for the weeks to come. And we should really be well informed. We should really know why our government is taking some measures now at this moment. That doesn't, for some people, doesn't look so bad yet, because we have, as I checked this morning, we had like 2,000 cases, recognized cases of coronavirus infection in Germany. For many people, that doesn't look so bad. Only 3 people in Germany had died as of this morning.
But Angela Merkel said the scientists had told her that up to 70% of the population is likely to be infected. That sounds scary to me.
That is scary.
Here in Germany.
That is scary. But 60 to 70% of people will be infected. But we don't know in which time frame. It could be in 1 year, and that would be really, really bad. It could be in 2 or 3 years. Also, it could be stopped if we find a vaccine, if we find some medicine that can cure this disease. But if we don't find this, of course, 2/3 of the population will on some point get this virus, because nobody is immune to this virus. And one person who is infected will infect like 2 to 3 others. So only when 2/3 of the population had been infected and they are immune or dead, the virus will not find enough people to infect. So it will slow down naturally after this. Yeah. And what we're trying to do now here in Germany, and what every country should do, is trying to extend this period of time as long as possible, to flatten the epidemic curve as long as possible.
Ariane Reimers, what do you say? You've got this special connection to China. This is where, as far as we know, this broke out, or at least it was, we heard about it first coming from southern China. What do you say about it all?
Well, it emerged in Wuhan city in Hubei, province of Hubei. The first 3 weeks or 4 weeks after the end of December, when it was first detected, were kind of nobody talked about it in China besides some doctors. So that was a dangerous period, and so it was like the local government, the provincial government, the city government, they covered it up. And only after 2 or 3 weeks they realized how big the danger is, and then they switched to complete strict measures. So they did this locking down of Wuhan, locking down the whole province of Hubei, and then also taking strict measures in the whole of China. China. And that led, at the end, this very, very strict measures, which only an authoritarian regime can take, that led to now, when, if we believe the figures we know today, that they, at least for the moment, they are able to cope with the virus. And so the clinics, the provisional clinics, they set up in Wuhan, they're closed now. It's big pictures all over. And I think also part of the narrative is that Xi Jinping visited Wuhan, so it's kind of he declared war on the virus, and now kind of the war in China is now kind of won for the moment. And
for the moment.
so that's what he likes to tell his country, but to tell the world. That's also one part of offering help now to others, which is very positive. It's big help because in China there are a lot of production sites which produce all this like hygienic masks and so on, but also is a sign of now we are able to give you help you need, like Italy, where they send surgical masks and also send medical experts.
Malte, what do you say as a journalist and as a citizen to what's going on around you here in Germany and in the world at large?
First of all, I think there is no angst in Germany right now. The prevalent feeling...
There is no angst in Germany
no angst
right now.
Right now. The prevalent feeling is that of insecurity. But this is partly due to the nature of this virus, because many things are unknown. How many percent got infected, how many will die from it, and so on and so on. So you're always talking about ranges from 0.5 to 3.4% and things like that. So nobody really knows what is going on. So that's why I think that the key for answering this crisis is with honesty and clarity. Government should be honest about what they know, what their plans are and why, and they should inform the public on a daily basis, not just once in a press conference like the Chancellor did, but on a daily basis, because everything is changing. The people want to know what is happening. If there is a closure, will it last for 2 weeks? Will it be longer? Will it be extended? And things like that. And even though if you don't know things, just talk about the things you don't know. I think that is one of the key elements. And if the last thing I would say is globally, I don't think that the world is understand that we are talking about a global crisis. Every nation tries to find a solution for itself. And I think this is part of the problem. In China, they did it. They do it in Iran, in Italy, in the European Union. They do it in the United States. But we are talking about a global crisis that affects potentially everybody because it's a pandemic.
Before we proceed, let's just hear, you mentioned the United States, and US President Donald Trump has suspended travel now from Europe to the US. He talked of strong but necessary restrictions. Let's just listen for a second to what he had to say and then come back and talk about it a little bit more. Donald Trump, the US President.
New cases from entering our shores. We will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days. The new rules will go into effect Friday at midnight. And these prohibitions will not only apply to the tremendous amount of trade and cargo, but various other things as we get approval.
What do you make of those comments, Malte?
I think Trump made some very bad mistakes, and I think the crisis in the United States is about to develop, and I'm afraid it will be worse than in other countries. The first case was detected on January 23rd. From that time to the end of February and the beginning of March, you had just 500 cases in 14 states that were tested. Just a comparison, in South Korea, did 100,000 cases to be tested in that area of time. So very, very few people had been tested. We are talking about a country where you have 28 million people without health insurance. We're talking about a country with a quarter of laborers who have no paid leave if they are sick. And so I think the worst is still to come. And I'm afraid that closing the border for Europeans won't help a lot, because I don't think that Europeans contributed to this crisis on any kind of scale.
That's interesting, because Wiebke, the US President, Mr. Trump, he also said that Europe had, quote, failed to take the same precautions as the US in combating the coronavirus. Effectively,
I'm sorry, but
the blame game has started.
This is completely ridiculous. I mean, the virus is already in the United States. They have massive outbreaks. All the scientists think that they already have massive outbreaks in the Seattle area, at least, that they have not detected yet, because there's almost no testing going on in the United States. Yeah. So they don't have to fear about the virus getting into their country. It's already there. They have to be worried about recognizing the virus and finding the cases, isolating the cases, and taking care of their sick people that will show up very, very soon in masses, like we are seeing in the north of Italy. I think Italy committed the same mistake. They didn't recognize the epidemic when it started in their country. They recognized the epidemic when the first very, very sick, critically sick people showed up in hospitals and started dying. And that's why they have so many hundreds of dead people by now.
OK. Italy is the European country worst affected by the virus. It's imposed tough measures in a desperate bid to prevent further loss of life. Let's have a look.
Milan, Venice, and Rome. These otherwise bustling cities are like ghost towns. The residents have to stay at home. Nobody's allowed outside without good reason. Public events have been cancelled. Schools, universities, theatres and museums are closed. Anyone caught violating the restrictions may be fined or even jailed. What do the Italians think of these measures? Like inmates at home, not being able to go out, to do things, not being able to use your time. But we have to keep with the measures and the law.
At some point, if the coronavirus has to come, so be it. I am young and I can handle it. We are all worried, but without being alarmist and without hysteria.
Italy's famed nonchalance is no help. The coronavirus has struck its industrial heart, a hard blow to a country already struggling with economic crisis. This may be a preview of things to come, as other countries battle the virus. A country in quarantine. But will all the precautions prove effective?
Ariane, two questions. Will precautions prove effective, and is the lockdown justified?
That's very complicated to answer. So if I take the comparison with China, the lockdown was effective. So yes, to a certain extent, it is effective to just basically prohibit all the contacts, social contacts. It's all about social contacts. And if you just stop it, then it seems to be effective. That we can learn from China. Like all my friends in Beijing who've been like kind of quarantined, not as bad as in Wuhan, but also been there like in-house and only leaving with maybe one other person, cycling, walking, and empty streets. Beijing was not bad. Beijing, there was a few cases compared to Wuhan, and the Chinese government, with its very, very strict measures, made it possible that it didn't spring over to a very bad extent to Beijing or to Shanghai, to the other big cities of metropolis of China. So yes, it is effective. On the other side, it is hard, especially in democratic countries like ours, where we are used to have our individual freedom. It seems to be very strict, and it's very hard to understand. I think it's easier to understand in China if the government says you don't leave your house, the neighborhood committee says you don't leave your house, you don't leave your house, because the state police will be there, or anybody will be inquiring later, and you know that. You will be punished for that. And that's different, which is good. I don't want to say that I want to have a China system here, but it's that's a little bit of a problem why it's so difficult for us to accept, in my opinion. And I see it with me personally. I think it's difficult to accept.
I mean, are we going to have a lockdown here in the next week or two? Are we going to go down the same path as Italy,
the next
China?
week or two, it always
inevitable?
depends on how the virus in Germany will develop, and we just don't know yet how it will. The probabilities are high that what the Chancellor Merkel said, we might have half of the population being infected. But what has to be understood, and Wiebke Hollersen just talked about it, we have to flatten the curve. I mean, 100 cases in a week might be worse than 1,000 cases in a month. Because that's all what you have to do, and that's what people have to understand. It's not to avoid any kind of chance that you get infected by it. It is to avoid that too many people get infected at once, because then the burden for the system is just too high.
I completely agree. I would like to add that people have to understand that we are dealing here with exponential growth. So if you have 100 cases in 1 week, it will not be, without measures, 1,000 cases in a month, but it will double like every 3 to 4 days. So you have 100 cases on Monday, you have 200 on Thursday, you have 400 on Sunday, and so on and so on. So everybody can do the math. and can look at these curves that we are dealing with. And the virus here in Germany is exactly the same virus as in Italy. It is as contagious as in Italy. It is as deadly as in Italy. And it's the same virus all over the world. It has not mutated, as we know yet. Scientists don't see any really important mutations. So it's exactly the same virus that the whole world is dealing with now. It doesn't behave differently in Italy or in South Korea. And South Korea is managing quite well. Italy is not managing well. So it depends on us. It depends on every country how we deal with this virus, how we deal with this epidemic, how we get people to stay at home, how we get people to really practice social distancing, not to get close to your loved ones. It's really hard. It's hard not to hug your friends.
The question is, are people going to play along? I mean, Angela Merkel, we mentioned Angela Merkel. She said yesterday, solidarity, common sense, and our hearts for one another are being put to the test. I hope we will pass the test. It all sounds drastically, desperately sentimental to me, as far as this is an existential crisis possibly in the making. People behave badly.
Yes. But it's up to everyone. It's up to us. It's up to everyone to take the right decision. And as you told, not to hug everybody, not to shake hands. So we didn't shake hands today when we met here. So everybody should do this.
We just have to learn how to cope with insecurity.
Also, famously, people say about the Germans, everybody is okay about everything in Germany as long as everything is okay.
Right. We don't know if the virus will be with us the next fall, the next winter, next year. We just don't know. And we don't know for example, how it behaves in warmer areas. We haven't talked yet about 1.3 billion people living in Africa. We have an outbreak in Ghana. How it behaves under warmer conditions, we just don't know. But if we are talking of washing our hands with warm water and soap, and avoid social contact, let's look to the metropolis cities in some of African areas where people live very close, have no warm water and no soap. We just don't know how to deal with it. We have to think ahead about what a global crisis needs a global solution.
As we think ahead, to what extent should we not just be worried about the threat to public health through the virus, but the threat to society, to the fabric of society? I'm talking about...
I know.
I think you know what I'm talking about. What do you say?
I know, but I think we have to learn how to react flexible. The next day could be a new situation. The following day could be the very new situation, and we have to be flexible. We have to be honest to each other, what we know and what we don't know. People have to be informed, and sometimes you have to say, we do it for the next 14 days. We can't assure that we have to not prolong it for the next 4 weeks. So we have to be innovative. Why not have telemedicine? People talking to a doctor online, education. That if schools are closed, people just can continue with their education, and so on and so on. So I think a lot of us is asked from us as a society, but I think we should be able to cope with that.
And it's not useful to have a blame game on, it's China, or it's Europe, it's Iran, or they didn't do the right thing. So that's why I'm kind of shaking my head about what Trump said. We talked about it because he said it's like...
Foreign virus.
It's a foreign virus. It's coming from Europe, and he closed borders for Europeans, but not for Europeans, but for Schengen states, which makes it even more ridiculous, because the UK people can travel freely. So and people from non-Schengen states. So that tells us it's a virus. It's not like looking at a border, like, oh no, that's a border, so it's closed, I can't go. So it's not very rational.
OK, let's shift the focus. When it comes to the global economy, there are huge fears. Plummeting revenues, stock markets in free fall, supply bottlenecks, rising unemployment. So will the coronavirus trigger a global recession?
This is a one-off situation. I can't remember ever experiencing anything like it. If the coronavirus starts picking up speed and paralyzes other countries around the world, in the worst-case scenario, it could lead to a world economic situation similar to what we had in 2008 or 2009. Day for day around the world, share prices are dropping lower and lower. Analysts hardly dare to predict how much farther they'll fall. In many places, production has come to a halt. Supply chains have broken down or hit bottlenecks. The damage so far is incalculable. The International Air Transport Association anticipates losses in the billions of euros for airlines. Everywhere, major events and trade fairs are being cancelled. Over 100 in Europe alone. Among them are the Geneva Motor Show and the Leipzig Book Fair. The tourism industry has already booked untold losses. Many tour operators are struggling to survive. Is the coronavirus a major disaster for the global economy?
Malte, your question. Is it a major disaster for the global economy?
I think the very short answer is yes. It is a disaster, and the probability is high that we will face a recession. The question is, how will the world cope with this? I mean, if we look back to the financial crisis in 2008, in the fall of 2008, or it was in November, we had the first huge G20 summit in Washington of the states coming together and looking for a solution for that. In the spring of 2009, they decided upon a huge package of $1.1 trillion to help the world economy and come out of this mess. So we have to be able to find a global solution to this crisis and the financial crisis as well. I mean, we have a health system crisis and a financial crisis coming together, and this is explosive.
Yeah.
Where do you see the solution coming from? Going back to the Chinese seem to be implying that they've now got a handle on this, and that we in the West, we're failing to
Not really.
We're dithering in the West.
I think talking about economy, China does not know yet how to solve these economic problems either. So that's the next question. The health system was first, and it's just for the moment it seems to be kind of contained, at least for the moment, in China. But then the economy, we don't know, because China is also an export nation. So it is also dependent on international global trade and so on, yeah. as Germany is, as Europe is, as the United States are. So it's very, very hard now to predict to what extent all these global trades, to what extent the global trade system is affected. For me, it's very hard to predict what will go on half a year from now. But it will be affected. It is a disaster, and every country now, and Europe as the European Union, they have to talk about how to help companies, how to help small companies, how to help self-employed people, and that not after half a year, half of the countries is without money, for example, or half of the companies have to close, or people are not paid, people cannot pay their rents, and it's a whole bunch of things which can happen. So that's up to national governments and talking about the European Union. It's up to the European Union to solve these questions now.
Wiebke, at the moment, there's not just the corona crisis, there's an oil crisis in the background somewhere, there's a refugee crisis, there's a crisis on the financial markets. What is your explanation for why that has all come together like a perfect storm?
I don't know, fate maybe? I don't think that this virus has any agenda, that it has chosen this time to show up. I don't think there's anything that... Maybe the other things are more connected to each other, but I'm a science reporter, so I don't really would like to comment on economics or politics.
Your thoughts?
But the virus definitely doesn't have an agenda.
The virus doesn't have an agenda, but it can make things worse. For example, the refugee crisis. I mean, we already talked about how it started, that the virus was called the Chinese virus, and now it's the European virus. And there are right-wingers in Lesbos on the Greek island who said it's a refugee virus. They bring the virus with them. So the blame game has already started, and that makes matters worse. And if you have a recession and you have a rising unemployment, we are talking in different terms about immigration and refugees and problems like this. So I think many problems that we are facing and we are dealing with might get worse through the virus.
And also being a danger for democracy at the end. Yeah. That, like Trump, you can observe what Trump did. So it's like closing borders seems to be so tempting because it seemed to be so logic at the first sight. It is the contrary. But people like right wingers might think that's the solution to a lot of problems. They've always said it time and again. The refugees gone, nationalism on the uprise, and now finally they think they can fight the virus at least with words, closing borders. borders. And I think that's also a danger we probably will face in some time, that we're talking about the danger to democracy.
But they will very soon notice in the US that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Very soon.
OK, you guys have been pretty upbeat, I have to say, today. Intriguing. The question we asked at the top of the show is the coronavirus, is it out of control? Is it out of control?
No, I think it's not out of control yet. I mean, some countries really show that it can be controlled, it can be contained, it can be slowed down, the spread of the virus. In some countries, definitely it looks worse, but I wouldn't say it's in all countries it's out of control. It's not.
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks very, very much for joining us today here on To The Point. It's been a difficult topic. I hope we've given you plenty of food for thought. If so, come back next week. Until then, bye-bye and tschüss.